Do you believe hospitals sleep at night? Have you ever walked through a hospital at 3 o'clock a.m. when the lights are dimmed, and every creak of a stretcher or flicker of a fluorescent bulb feels like something watching? They say hospitals are where life begins and ends. But what about what lingers between? What if the dead don't always move on? What if, when the visitors leave and the corridors go silent, something else wakes up? I used to think those ghost stories people told about night shifts were just exaggerations, just tired minds playing tricks in sterile hallways. That was until I worked alone, overnight, in the East Wing of St. Luke's Memorial Hospital, a place with a history soaked in pain, tragedy, and secrets no one dared put in the records. I was a registered nurse, skeptic, rational, scientific. That night changed everything. Let me take you back. It was supposed to be a routine night. I'd picked up an extra shift. Money was tight, and I didn't mind a quiet graveyard slot if it meant fewer patients, fewer codes, less chaos. But there was a catch. East Wing's short-staffed, the charge nurse had said, almost apologetically. We need someone to watch over it. Mostly empty beds, just a couple palliative cases. I agreed. Simple enough. When I arrived at the East Wing around 11:45 p.m., the halls were already too quiet. The lights flickered lazily overhead, casting yellowish pools across the tile. The walls were painted a sickly pale green, and the paint was cracked near the corners. It looked more like an abandoned asylum than a modern ward. There were only 3 patients that night. Mr. Delaney in room 304, comatose after a stroke. Mrs. Kettering, room 308, terminal cancer. Room 312, unassigned. Locked. A room the nurses jokingly called the cold room. I didn't know why. Yet, I made my rounds, logged the meds, and settled into the nurses' station with a cup of lukewarm coffee. Midnight came, then 1 a.m. And then, the lights in room 312 flicked on. My head jerked up. I squinted down the corridor. It was unmistakable. Soft fluorescent glow leaking from underneath the door. But that door was locked. No patient. No reason for it to be lit. I clicked my pen light on and walked down the hall. The closer I got, the colder the air became. I mean bone-deep, unnatural cold. Not the kind from overactive AC, but the kind that sinks into your skin and whispers along your spine. When I reached room 312, the light inside flicked off. I froze. My breath caught. I told myself it was faulty wiring, just an old hospital glitch. I reached for the handle. Still locked. I knocked once, half joking. Hello? Anyone in there? No answer. Then I heard it. A soft scraping on the other side of the door, like nails dragging slowly across the inside wall. I backed away. And as I did, the monitor at the nurses' station started beeping. Room 304. Mr. Delaney. I rushed to room 304. Mr. Delaney was unresponsive when I checked him an hour ago, but now his heart rate had spiked. Beep, beep, beep. Too fast. When I entered, the room was dark. Too dark. I reached for the wall switch, but it didn't work. My flashlight barely cut through the blackness. I approached the bed. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide with terror. Mr. Delaney, I whispered. His head turned violently toward me, like a puppet jerked by invisible strings. And then in a voice that didn't sound like his, it was too guttural, too deep, he said, "She's awake now." My skin crawled. Who's awake? He pointed toward the door with a trembling hand. Room 312, then he flatlined. There's no 3rd floor in the hospital. At least that's what the building plans say. It's a 2-story structure. And yet, some nights the elevator stops on a 3rd floor. It happened to me around 2:15 a.m. I had just dropped off some supplies to the 2nd floor and hit the button for the ground level. The elevator lurched, began its descent, then stopped. Ding! 3 lit up. The doors opened to a long dark hallway. No lights, just a sickly green glow leaking from broken overheads. The walls were cracked, stained with something dark that looked wrong, like dried blood and mold mixed together. I thought maybe it was some kind of maintenance level. I stepped out just a foot, enough for the door to close behind me. Silence. Then the sound of dragging, something heavy being pulled across the floor, slow and wet. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I stepped back and pressed the elevator button. Nothing. From the hallway, a shadow moved, crawling along the far wall. Not walking, crawling. When the elevator dinged again and the doors opened, I leapt inside. As they closed, I swear I saw a pale face looking back at me from the hallway. Eyes wide and mouth open as if screaming, but there was no sound. I never got off on that floor again. And I've met others who say the same. The 3rd floor doesn't exist, except when it does. One night, I was assigned to escort a deceased patient down to the morgue. I didn't like doing that alone, but we were short-staffed. I wheeled the gurney through the empty hallways, the wheels squeaking with every step. The morgue is in the basement, cold, quiet, and smells like bleach and metal. I signed the paperwork and moved the body into one of the freezer drawers. That's when I heard a knock. 3 soft knocks from inside another drawer. I froze. Maybe it was the cold playing tricks on my hearing. But then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm. I backed away slowly. Another drawer rattled, then another. And then I heard a whisper, "Let me out." I ran. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about my job. I just ran until I was back in the ER. Security went down to check. They found all the drawers closed. Nothing disturbed. But later I spoke to the morgue technician. He told me he quit night shifts after hearing the same knocking, followed by the sound of sobbing. He said sometimes they find handprints on the inside of the glass. Ward C hasn't had patients in years. They say it was shut down after an outbreak, MRSA or something worse. But the weird thing is, no one remembers when exactly it closed. It's just been empty. Still, we hear things from there. It started as whispers. Quiet, hushed conversations in the dark. You'd think someone left a TV on or maybe security was patrolling. But it never stopped. Even when you walked by. Even when the door was locked. One night I got curious. I peeked through the window. Inside was pitch black, but then faintly I saw movement. A figure standing in the middle of the ward, facing the door, not moving. When I blinked, it was gone. Another time, a nurse swore she heard her name being whispered from behind the door. She opened it. No one there. But when she turned to leave, the door slammed shut and locked from the inside. She was trapped in the dark for 3 minutes. When security got it open, she was curled in a corner, shaking, repeating one thing over and over. "Don't listen to them. Don't listen." We keep that ward sealed now. But the whispers, they still come through the walls. It was a particularly cold Friday night, and the emergency department had quieted down after an intense trauma. The heater buzzed, casting a low hum through the hallways. I was walking toward the pediatric wing when I heard it, a baby crying. At first, I thought nothing of it. Babies cry. But this one was off. The sound echoed strangely, not from a room, but from the wall. I stopped mid-step, pressing my ear against the cool plaster, and there it was again, faint and hollow. The unmistakable wail of a newborn coming from inside the wall. I radioed for the nurse on duty. "You guys have a baby back here?" She looked at me like I had 2 heads. "No, that wing's empty. Been closed for maintenance for a week." We both stood still, the wailing growing louder, more urgent. I felt my spine lock. It was as if the baby was in pain, trapped, calling for someone. I followed the sound down the hallway, past the rooms, until it stopped suddenly by a sealed door at the far end. The plaque read, "Infant Recovery, closed indefinitely." I asked about it later. An older nurse pulled me aside, clearly shaken. "They shut that unit down after the fire. You didn't hear about it? 3 babies died in that wing. Couldn't evacuate fast enough. I've heard that same cry twice since. Each time when I walk by that same sealed door. And each time it sounds closer." It was a slow night in the ICU. I went into the supply closet, a narrow room lined with mirrors on one side. It was strange, really. Hospitals usually avoid mirrors. This one looked like it had been part of the original structure. I was grabbing a saline bag when I noticed something in the mirror behind me. A shape. Tall, thin, and draped in what looked like a hospital gown. I spun around. Nothing. I turned back to the mirror, and there it was again, closer. Its head tilted sideways as if studying me. My breath hitched. Every rational part of me wanted to say it was a trick of the light, until the figure raised its hand in the mirror, and I didn't. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I reported it, of course. Security checked. Nothing. But I'm not the only one who's seen the figure. One nurse quit on the spot after she saw her own reflection smile back when she wasn't smiling. They eventually covered the mirrors with paper, but every now and then, someone forgets to tape it back after restocking. And that's when the ICU gets very, very cold.